I plan to be, Rachel, and I'll just say it right here to the world, that I'm going to be the first surfer to live and continue to surf past 100 years old. And so I'm going to live hopefully to 120, but I'm going to be surfing, I hope, until the day I die. I mean, that's just the thing that I love, I'm passionate about. And, I'm halfway there. I am so excited for the next 50 years.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Scheer Madness. Today I have Dr. Thomas Hemingway joining us on my podcast, and I had the honor to go on his podcast not but a couple of months ago, nerd out on all things gut health, and today I get to pick his brain about some pretty awesome topics: the root cause of disease, how to boost your metabolism, a little bit on gut health, because, I always love to dive into gut health. But Dr. Thomas Hemingway is a holistic and integrative medical doctor who lives and shares his personal and professional philosophy of prevention over prescription, which is everything that I'm all about at Rachel Scheer Nutrition. I'm never against taking the pill, but I am pro getting to the root cause and addressing what's off in the body first and foremost. And Dr. Thomas Hemingway has a goal of saving 100 million lives by optimizing health and wellness through natural means. He has recently wrote a book, Preventable: 5 Powerful Practices to Avoid Disease and Build Unshakable Health, which is dropping here this year. He loves sharing his message in his top-rated health podcast, Unshakable Health. So we'll be talking all about unshakable health today, which I love, where he is known for distilling down medical knowledge into easy, digestible, actionable steps that you guys can do, which will help change our lives and help us become more present now and in the future. And along with all of that, amazing things that he's got going on top of that, he's a husband, he's a proud father of six kiddos here, who he enjoys spending time with outdoors, being creative. He's a surfer, he's a bro, snowboarding, skiing, hiking, so many outdoor activities. So Dr. Thomas Hemingway, it's an honor to have you on Scheer Madness today. Awesome,
Rachel. It's been a long time coming, and it was so fun to have you on my show, and I'm so pumped for this episode. It's an honor. So thanks for having me.
I know I got to have your wife on the show, who's just all around badass. We talked all about, women empowerment, about how you can really truly have it all. She's got a strong philosophy in health, and especially you two teaming up. Y'all are just two badasses together, especially with 6 kiddos and running the mission that you guys are both on individually and together. So, I mean, when I say it's an honor to have you coming on my show here now today. And one area I want to dive into is actually the story that your wife told me when I first met her. And it was really a bit about how you were a traditional medical doctor, I think working in ER, correct?
Yeah. Okay. I spent almost 2 decades, mostly in the ER, board certified physician. Yep. Seeing all the things.
So traditional medical doctor in the ER, gone more on the natural, the functional side. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, Rachel, I think for me, I've always been kind of more natural minded, and I've always had that as a personal belief. But in traditional Western medicine, it's kind of hard to really incorporate a lot of that into your day-to-day practice. If you're affiliated with a big hospital, a big center, I, for almost 2 decades was employed by different hospitals and ERs. And so, I was there primarily to help people in that moment of extreme urgency, whether it be an accident, illness, injury, what have you. And I felt really great about what I could do to help people in the moment. But I got to be honest with you, as I started getting a little older, and I consider myself super young, I'm turning 50 next year. And I started to see people this past decade, younger than I, present with things like first-time heart attacks, strokes. I mean, even die of sudden cardiac death, people in their 40s, men and women. And here I am, older than they are, going, what is going on here? Something is not right. 20 plus years ago, I should say, when I did my medical training, I almost never saw anybody have a heart attack that wasn't at least 60 or 70 years old. And now we're seeing 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. Like, what gives? Like, something is not right now in this country. In fact, I'm sure you know this, and I hope your listeners do too, but it's so interesting to step back a moment and just take sort of this 30,000-foot view approach and look at what's happening right here at home in the US. And so 5 years ago, a couple of years prior to COVID, our US life expectancy started to trend downward. In other words, for more than a century, and of course, all of our lifetimes, each and every year, the life expectancy has gone up until about 5 years ago, it started to dip. And with COVID, it dipped even more. And it's continued to dip each and every year for the last 5 years or so. And yet we have the best technology ever. We have most available techniques and treatments and things that we've never had before. And yet we are dying younger and just not living to our fullest. In fact, right now in this country, 2/3 of us are overweight. 66 point something% of us are classified as overweight. And it's super sad. And I look around, I'm like, what is going on here? We have such, amazing technology, amazing information, and we're just not getting it right. So I decided to pivot at this point because I just couldn't bear the thought of another 40-year-old or even 30-something-year-old having a heart attack or even dying, and without feeling like I wasn't doing enough to help these people. And in the moment, sure, I can help open up a blood vessel. I can, fix somebody's dislocated shoulder. I can do all those things. But if I'm not preventing these diseases that literally are killing us at a more rapid rate than ever before in human history, I feel like I'm not really accomplishing my mission. Because right now, Rachel, 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death worldwide, not just in the US, but worldwide, are almost entirely preventable. And of course, heart disease is number one in women and in men, not just in this country, but throughout the world. It's the number one killer, and it is nearly entirely preventable. So now I'm all about that and what we can do today, starting today, right now, simple, practical things, because we just, we got to do more. And I think all of us want to live a full life. We want to be healthy. We want to be able to do all the things that we would love to do with our kids, grandkids, our pets, our friends, whatever that looks like, and just not be, held back by, illness or disease or all these issues that are almost entirely preventable. So that's what got me turned around. And it's been a fun journey. And every morning I just get excited to wake up and share the message. So thanks.
I can hear the passion and everything that you're speaking about there. It truly radiates from you overall. And I can imagine how hard it must have been, of seeing all of these people sick. It's one thing, you got a broken arm and that kind of stuff. But to see, these young people, in the hospital, whether it's they have a heart attack and all of these things that could have been prevented overall, and really wanting to get on that side of medicine of like, how can I really help this not happen in the first place overall? So I'm excited to dive in a little bit deeper of, some of the root causes of disease, because like you said, so much of this really can be prevented, essentially by lifestyle, nutrition, everything that we're doing. One of my philosophies is I want to die young, but at an old age. So longevity is something that I'm really after. I want to be a vampire, never age, never get old. And I mean that more from like a physical standpoint of it all there. So let's dive into, some of the root causes of disease, because I'm all about getting to the root cause. And with my practice at Rachel Scheer Nutrition, we talk a bit about the 4 horsemen. And one of them I know you talk about quite a bit in your book, but it's inflammation, it's catabolic physiology, insulin resistance, and then oxidative stress. And I think, the most common is inflammation, and then it kind of goes up from there to things where it's like, okay, you got oxidative stress, but most of these are really lifestyle related issues that is leading to dis-ease in the body. So what are your thoughts on some of the driving factors for disease?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's interesting because when I did my medical training, we were always taught that, health is just simply the absence of disease. So if you're walking around and you don't have a label, you don't have diabetes, heart disease, obesity, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, then you're healthy. And I found that that's not exactly true. Health is much more than just the absence of disease. And many of us may have certain ailments, like I mentioned earlier, they're so darn common and we may not even know it. And so really at the root, what's so interesting, and I appreciate what you said about living, as long as you can, because that's what I want to do too. I plan to be, Rachel, and I'll just say it right here to the world, that I'm going to be the first surfer to live and continue to surf past 100 years old. And so I'm going to live hopefully to 120, but I'm going to be surfing, I hope, until the day I die. I mean, that's just the thing that I love, I'm passionate about. And, I'm halfway there. I am so excited for the next 50 years. And what's interesting about, sort of this common element, which I think almost all, disease processes share, is inflammation, which is cool, because when I was in medical school, we didn't learn that heart disease was literally a disease of inflammation. We didn't know that depression or anxiety or these kind of sort of mental health challenges are also inflammatory illnesses. The brain is literally inflamed. We didn't realize that all of these sort of gut health issues that people can have, everything from, the autoimmune conditions that I learned in medical school, like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, to the super common ones that we see each and every day, things that, cause people pain or constipation, or, we know the terminology here, things like dysbiosis of the gut. These are all inflammatory illnesses. And so what is inflammation? I think if we just kind of nail down for all of the listeners out there to understand inflammation. So there are really two types of inflammation. One is acute, or the inflammation that's happening right now to take care of a problem. Like say you fall down, you skin your knee, for example. You're going to have acute inflammation. You're going to have blood flow going to your knee. You're going to have immune cells going to hopefully fight off any invaders. They're also going to help get that tissue kind of ready to replace the damaged tissue. So that's the sort of right now sort of healing type of acute inflammation. So that is the good kind of inflammation that you need. Or if you get sick, for example, you get an illness and your body's fighting that off, and you're, sending in all the good troops, those killer cells and the, all of the lymphocytes and the macrophages and the neutrophils that all go and fight infection. That's a good thing when you have an illness. So that's acute inflammation, the type that comes to solve the problem at hand. Then the more common type nowadays is actually chronic inflammation, which is when you have literally this process going on day after day after day after day, and it never really goes away. And so this is a trigger for not only the body to get kind of ramped up and stressed. This is a super stressful thing for your body to have this. I sort of look at it this way, like, all of us that have ever been on a camp out, you kind of like to have a nice campfire at night to keep you warm. And a chronic inflammation is sort of like, when the fire is getting a little bit less exuberant and you're kind of getting ready to settle down, but it's still going, and having that fire like literally never go out, that's chronic inflammation. Acute inflammation is you have, sort of that cool bonfire that comes in for a day or two or three to kind of take care of whatever is happening, either an illness or an injury, and then it goes out and goes away. Whereas this chronic inflammation is literally burning day after day, night after night, week after week, month after month, year after year. And it is exhausting for your body. And also not only just a physical sense, but it wears you down, and it can actually lead to many other chronic ailments that we deal with. Everything from heart disease is inflammatory. Neurodegenerative conditions are inflammatory. All of the gut disorders are inflammatory. And so we need to figure out, and a lot of work has been done on this, but we need to kind of appreciate, I guess is a better word, for what can we do to kind of quell or diminish this ongoing inflammation, because nobody wants to have this going on every day of their life, because it's exhausting. You can feel it, right? Yeah. When you're inflamed, not only do you feel like your joints might be a little achy, maybe a little puffy, maybe your skin feels kind of heavy, puffy, you feel swollen, all those things, but you feel like you're devoid of energy, because literally you are burning extra energy to just keep that fire of inflammation going. So let me just share with you this super cool study. This was done, I think about a decade ago. They looked at what's called the basal metabolic rate. And that's sort of our, human rate of metabolism on a day-to-day basis. And the thought was this. So we have people that still live around the world, not too many different groups of them, that are hunter-gatherers, that are basically out foraging for their food or hunting or what have you. They're not eating anything from an amazing diet, and they're super active people. The Hazda out in Africa is one group of them who happens to have on average I think they walk like 15 miles a day or something, because they're always gathering either food from the ground or berries or honey, looking for honey, or they're looking for some game to kill and eat. And so they're a super active group. They almost never get heart disease or cancer or things of that nature, because those are all inflammatory illnesses, and they leave a very, very low inflammatory life. And so they measured their metabolic rate, and then they compared it to the average Westerner, like you or I, or one of our, probably not you or I, but probably one of the average folks that is walking around that
You're
doesn't
not
necessarily. Yeah. They're sitting in their chairs most of the day, right? They're at the office, they're hardly moving. Maybe they're getting 1,000 steps in a day or something, as opposed to, 20 or 30,000 like these guys. And what was super interesting was that their basal metabolic rate, the average energy expenditure for one day, basal metabolic rate for them, the Westerner, was almost identical to the Hazda hunter-gatherer person, which at first was like, that doesn't even make a lot of sense. But then when they kind of figured it out, they realized that the average, person in the West, say here in the US, for example, has so much inflammation going on that they're literally burning through energy, even though we're sitting at our desk. And we notice it because we feel tired. We feel like we're devoid of energy. We feel like, oh my gosh, like we get home from an 8-hour workday at our desk and we're like, I can't even think about going to the gym right now. I don't have energy to get off the couch, right? But what was super interesting is that the basal metabolic rate of these two groups of people that are very disparate, very distinct, very different, was actually almost identical. Almost identical. What was not identical was everything else, right? Was what the two groups ate, right? The Hazda ate just natural, real food, nothing processed, nothing with a barcode or in a bag or a box or with an ingredients list. And then the average Westerner was eating, all kinds. In fact, I think, Rachel, you probably saw this, but the most recent data on this just came out a few weeks ago. And the number for here in the US of the percentage of processed food in our diet has gone up. I think it was upwards of 60% now. And these are actually highly processed foods, not just the average processing, but the the ultra processed. And in fact, even worse than that, which made me really sad as a father, I have 6 kids, and in children, this was much higher. Theirs was like 67% was highly processed or ultra processed foods, which is just, I see what my kids have on offer, for example, in their school lunch. They have these kinds of microwavable Hot Pockets and these like fake peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that aren't even real peanut butter or jelly or real bread. I mean, it's just like, how do you call that food? I personally call it a food-like substance.
Yeah.
But so in the cell, as you know, we have these energy sort of powerhouses called the mitochondria. And when they aren't functioning well, we basically feel like we have no energy. And the way to actually get them functioning well is all the things you like to talk about, which is, move your body, have a great natural, whole foods diet, and then do all the things like exercise, intermittent fasting, caloric restriction, things like this that actually both cause them to grow and also causes them to duplicate. So you get more of them, and so it's so interesting when you think about how, inflammation can literally affect almost every part of your body. And it just goes down to the fact that it's, that it just burns through all this energy. And then you're left with nothing. You're left feeling tired, crappy, brain fog, cloudy. And I felt all this about a decade ago. And that's when I kind of pivoted in my own personal life. And thank goodness, because now I'm turning 50 and I can keep up with all of my kids. In fact, I don't even like to share this because they would embarrass them, but I can do more pull-ups, more push-ups, more keep up with them. And I got teenagers. I got super hardy teenagers, but they can't hardly keep up with me. And it's an amazing problem to have.
Yeah, I love that so much. That's so awesome. And for everybody who's listening, I just kind of want to summarize here a little bit is, acute inflammation is not bad. This is something that we're all going to deal with when you get sick. If you're someone who's super into fitness, when you go work out, you get in the gym, you inflame your muscles a little bit there, you're going to deal with inflammation. That's good. During that period, I like to think of it as an acute stress on the body. I do ice baths every single day. Getting in the ice bath for 3 minutes is good for my body. Now, if I sit in there for an hour, not so good anymore for my body, and I'm going to have some repercussions for that ice bath there. But the problem is chronic inflammation throughout the body. That's what he's really speaking to. So that smoldering fire that's really never going out, that is then wreaking havoc on every other system in the body. from our hormones, our thyroid, our adrenals, to our brain. He talked about how, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, they have now found that that is due to neuroinflammation in the brain, to gut issues, which is something that I talk about quite a bit. All of these really come down to not acute inflammation, but chronic inflammation in the body. And Dr. Thomas, I know one thing that I'm always really trying to get to is the root cause of the root cause of the root cause, right? So the root cause, right, of disease is inflammation, but we also have to ask the question, what is driving that inflammation there in the first place, right? Whether that's through
Absolutely.
diet, lifestyle, stress, because sometimes people do all this testing. They're like, oh my gosh, I have inflammation. Yes, take some supplements, take your omega-3 fatty acids that can help exponentially, take some other different micronutrients that you need. But we really have to ask the question, where is all of this inflammation coming from in the beginning? So what are some of the driving factors now for inflammation and what causes that in the body?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest, or maybe three biggest triggers. Number one is food. I mean, literally every time we open our mouth, we have either the potential to feed our bodies with the very best available nutrients. I like to say food is medicine, or, it's either the best medicine or it's a slow poison. And we get to make that choice multiple times a day. It really starts with our food. And I know that sounds really, really simple, and it can be. That's the cool part about this, is it can be that simple. So I'm somebody who believes in adding rather than subtracting too much, because none of us like to have stuff taken away, right? We all like to act like my 5-year-old. And when I take something away that she really likes, she's going to throw a fit. And we as adults, we throw fits too, because we don't like stuff taken away. And so I like to use the additive approach. And so any food that's real, that's whole, that's natural, that literally is a single ingredient food is on my good list. I mean, if you can do, the best as far as looking for the best sourcing of that food, like kudos to you if you can go to a local market where you can get your food that is truly organic. It may not just carry that organic label, but it's actually truly organic. It's local. Maybe you grew it yourself, or the source of whatever meat you might eat, whether it be fish, your friend caught it out in the ocean, or somebody raised a certain, whatever kind of meat you may or may not eat. If you know the source and you trust it and it's whole, real food, that's the best place to start. Because really, honestly, Rachel, there's only 3 things that we should really work hard to avoid in our diet. And they're super simple. It's basically the super highly processed sugars. Most sugar we should avoid, right? If you're getting anything that has a label and it has sugar in there, there's like 30 names for sugar. I don't care if it says cane sugar or if it says brown rice syrup or agave
organic,
nectar.
natural cane sugar.
Organic. Yeah. My favorite is when they throw the organic, whatever kind of brown rice syrup. And it's like, gosh, anything, especially, I mean, if it does say something like high fructose corn syrup, like that should be a total red flag to avoid that, because that's one of the worst out there. But there's so many others that really kind of are tricky because they call it something else. They call it a natural sugar, and it's an organic maple, or it's an organic brown rice syrup, or whatever, agave nectar, and all these kinds of things. It's just sugar, to be honest. And we really should have, that really, really much lower than we do in our diet, because the average, I think, American, gosh, the latest figures I saw on this, we consume something like 160 pounds of sugar a year, something like that. I mean, it's some ridiculous amount. And then another 150 or so pounds of the highly processed grains and flours. That's number 2. So first is highly processed sugars, of course, high fructose corn syrup. Also, we should avoid a lot of the artificial sugars, and we can talk about why that's an issue later, all those sweeteners that are damaging to the gut. But the second thing is just the highly processed grains and flours. Like, right now, we are ultra hyper focused on this in my family. We used to be pretty good about going gluten-free and not really doing stuff with processed wheat and grains and things. And now we're like super honed in on this because my daughter was recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And these are all things that could be a trigger for her, because diabetes is also an inflammatory illness. And so trying to eliminate any trigger, and they can be, like I said, the sugars, it can be the flours, whether they be grains from wheat, or it could be corn, it could be even soy. There's so many of these highly processed grains out there that just aren't awesome for us, because it's not like back in the day, right, Rachel? I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of what wheat used to look like 200 years ago compared to what wheat looks like now. Like, it's distinct, completely different. The wheat of today is like just barely a couple feet tall. The wheat of like 100 years ago is like 6, 8 feet tall. Now they grow this stuff that's called dwarf wheat that's super, able to withstand the pesticides that they spray, right? Because they spray the heck out of them with pesticides. So they're resistant to the pesticides to the point where they can spray the heck out of them. But then, of course, we get those downstream effects. So anything that's highly processed, whether it be sugar or grains, try to avoid that. The third thing is the seed oils. And so those are basically anything that wears the hat that says vegetable oil, anything vegetable oil. This is canola. And I don't care if it says organic canola oil, expeller pressed canola oil. It doesn't matter. All of these so-called seed oils, which the concept I like people to remember is that if they have to go through a super rigorous process to get oil out of a seed, like canola, which comes from grapeseed or rapeseed, and then they have soybean oil, which is also a tiny little bean, and they got to squeeze oil out of that, or they have so many varieties, corn oil, like the classic, right? The Mazola corn oil and things like that. Anything that comes from a seed that they have to press with high pressure, high heat, they deodorize it, they bleach it. Any of those seed oils, there's 7 or 8 of them, depending on what list you're looking at. You got to avoid those like the plague. They're so inflammatory. And like we were talking about inflammation, these are some of the biggest triggers of inflammation in the body. And so the ones that are good, if we, step back 2,000 years and we go, well, what did they use 2,000 years ago? Well, olive oil was one of the most common, right? Because they just take the fruit and they just squeeze it, they press it, and you get oil out of it. In Hawaii, we have coconuts, and it's the same process. You literally just press it, you squeeze it, and you get oil out of coconuts. Super easy. Avocados, very oily fruits, same thing. You can get the oil out very simply with just pressing. You don't need high heat. You don't need high pressure. You don't need to deodorize it, bleach it, and all of these things to make it so we can't notice how literally rancid these things come in the bottle. Anything that's corn oil, vegetable oil, any of these things, canola oil, whether it says it's organic or not, they literally come to you rancid. And we don't know it because they've bleached it. They've deodorized it. They've tried to take out all the triggers that we would go, oh, that seems really, it smells funny. It's kind of weird. It's kind of gross. Well, they are still that way, but they're hiding it. And so those are really only the 3 things that I recommend people work hard to avoid. And then just add everything to their diet that's full of color, like any vegetables or fruit. Go to your farmer's market. I try to tell people, just pick out one new thing a week and experiment, add it to your plate. And the more colors, the better. So that's kind of the simple place to start with food. Additive is where I like to go. Try to go to farmers markets, try to travel a little bit, see what other people are cooking around the world. They have so many amazing cuisines that are natural. I mean, every time I've been to Europe, for example, I'm just literally in heaven because I eat everything and I don't stress. Like if I go to the, say a restaurant here in the US, I'm always like, gosh, I don't know if I should eat that. They probably have it soaked in some kind of vegetable oil or soaked in some kind of fake butter substance or whatever. And so I try to tell them, oh, I'm allergic to these oils, and the only thing I can have is natural butter. And so all of a sudden my, menu of 30 things is reduced to like 2 or 3 things.
Wow.
So it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, that's a good experiment to do. Say you're allergic to vegetable oils, canola oil, those kind of stuff, and see what list it gets dwindled down to.
It's amazing. Yeah. My wife gets embarrassed when I do that. She doesn't like it, but I do it out of curiosity and because I really try to avoid that stuff, and it's everywhere. So
yeah, I love that you simplify it so much because, right now we overcomplicate things, especially from the nutrition and the fitness world that I kind of also dabble in over there. We complicate everything. What is the best diet? What are all these things that we need to do? And it's like, guys, if you eat real whole food, unprocessed, unrefined, if you can, local and organic, without herbicides, pesticides, so real fruit, real vegetables, cook them yourself, get fats that are natural, avocado, olive oils, everything that you mentioned there, eat high quality animal protein. One, you're probably going to maintain a good body composition because it's really hard to overeat a lot of these foods. It's really hard to overeat steak. Most people love steak, and you'll eat it till you feel full, especially if you add in some different veggies with there. Like our body's going to naturally reach its point of satiety, and we'll stop eating and be like, wow, I'm full. But give someone, ice cream, chips, all of these ultra processed food, is we will override these signals every single day in our brain because of the massive dopamine response that we're getting. We don't really feel full. We don't really feel satisfied. The same thing happens very often with a lot of those artificial sweeteners. So, when we can get rid of the bagged food, the boxed food, everything with a long list of ingredients, and just simply eat real whole food, it's amazing. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know what good felt like. And that's something that I hear from so many of my clients. They're like, I didn't even know I really felt bad before, but I feel like I just developed this like new baseline of like what good feels like. And it's amazing. And they're like, I don't even miss that food. And they're like, because now I associate that food, eating everything. And I used to give myself the excuse of like, all right, I just want to enjoy myself, what everybody else is doing, parties, all that kind of stuff. But now, like, knowing what good feels like, it's so powerful. And to know, like, I don't want to ever go back to feeling that way I felt. So I love that you simplify it, just cut out those processed foods, comes in a bag or a box, start eating real whole food. And then you hear from so many people, but Rachel, but Dr. Thomas, it's not that easy. It's not that easy, and it's like, but it can be, right? It can be that easy. We make it hard. We make it really difficult, and we build it up in our brain that it has to be something that is super complicated. And what if we just said, okay, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to buy the food. I'm not going to buy the processed foods, the chips or anything. And I'm not saying I'm never going to touch that again in my life, but I'm going to not have that in my home. My home is a safe place. I'm not going to have those foods where when I know I'm at my lowest moment, that I can reach for and grab for the chips and the pasta and all of these kinds of foods.
95% of your body's serotonin is produced by the bacteria that resides in your gut. And this explains why when my gut was a wreck, or when clients come to work with me at Rachel Scheer Nutrition, they don't just suffer from things like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, but they also have symptoms of anxiety, depression, and brain fog, because our gut and our brain are highly interconnected. And as Hippocrates says, all disease begins and ends in the gut. And this is the exact reason why I am so passionate about taking a functional, root cause-based approach for any chronic health condition: gut issues, mental health illness, autoimmune conditions, stubborn weight loss, you name it. Me and my team do a comprehensive analysis looking at all these different systems so we can test instead of just guess, and then develop a customized nutrition plan and protocol to address these root causes and balances in the body and restore function. If you want to book a free 30-minute call with anyone from my team, click the link in the show notes or visit rachelscheer.com.
I also hear the excuse quite a bit that, preparation, okay, but I have to prepare these foods and it takes time. And I'm like, you should see how quick I can put together meals. I prep some protein, and sometimes I buy some pre-cooked if I'm feeling extra lazy and I got a lot going on that week. But I can get the real proteins. I can prep the proteins. I can get a bed of arugula, chunk that in a bowl. I can put some chicken, some salmon, some bison. That's one of my go-tos. Throw that in there. Put some avocado on top. Put some other things like olives in there. Maybe I cooked up some sweet potatoes if I have them. If not, I put together a really good salad. Have some fruit, some blueberries, some antioxidants. And you know what? If I have the protein cooked or I buy it ready, that will take me literally 3 minutes to throw that all together. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be complicated. We just make it complicated, and we then struggle with making these changes. And maybe we need to start asking the question is it because we are telling ourselves that it's hard and that it's complicated that we struggle so much to make some of these changes? What if we started to say, hey, it's easy. All I got to do is not buy the food and keep good, healthy, real whole food in my house and just watch what happens, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that you share that it doesn't have to be difficult. And I can speak to the audience from a perspective of a parent too that has little kids, that we always like to use the kids as an excuse. Even I have, it's like, well, the kids won't eat that. You know what? Try it. You would be surprised. It really doesn't have to be difficult. You are probably familiar with the author and scientist B.J. Fogg. He wrote this book called Tiny Habits. And I like to use the example that he posts in the book about having a refrigerator that's safe. Exactly what you described, Rachel, where basically everything in the refrigerator is just real food. So you don't have to think like, super hard. Oh, can I eat this? Can I not eat this? And just start with that. Start with the refrigerator, because that's probably the easiest place, right? You're usually going to refrigerate the fresh, vegetables and fruits that you buy. So that's a good place to start. The safe pantry is a little bit more challenging, because if you go to your pantry today and you look for anything that has those top 3 things that I mentioned, right? Something that has a processed sugar or a processed grain or flour, or any of the seed oil, soybean oil, canola, rapeseed, sunflower, safflower, canola, all this stuff, you're going to throw out like 90% of what's in your pantry, because that's basically all of the foods that you put in a pantry, right? All the snack foods, the chips, the crackers, the granola bars, the cereals, all of those things are so full of not so awesome ingredients. Like, I'm not going to ask you to throw all that out today, but if you start simple, start small with just your refrigerator, take a look at what's in your refrigerator. Probably the things that you'll end up tossing will be most of the salad dressings, because almost all of them will have either canola oil or soybean oil or one of these processed seed oils. And just be careful, because I find that I prefer to make my own. So I just make salad dressing with olive oil and a little bit of lemon and salt and pepper. And maybe if I'm going to do a balsamic, I'll throw in some balsamic vinegar. And just with those 3 or 4 simple ingredients that are all natural single ingredient things, I make my own salad dressing, because it's super hard to find great quality dressings out there. There's like Mark Sisson's brand out there, which is what is it called? Primal Kitchen or something like that. He's pretty good about eliminating all those bad ingredients. And so I know I can trust his, but almost every other salad dressing out there is, even if it says, this is the thing that I hate, Rachel. It'll say olive oil dressing. And you look at the ingredient, and olive oil is like number 6.
And canola oil.
And even before olive oil on the list, you'll see canola or soybean. And it's like, it enrages me. It just makes me so furious, because and I don't want people to be like super, hyper about this ingredients thing, but you got to look. If you don't look, you won't find it, and they're hiding in plain sight. But it really can be easy. And so Rachel's tip of just starting simple with just things that you can look at and you recognize real vegetables, real fruit, and real sources of protein that don't have an ingredients list, just start there. Start with the refrigerator. Maybe next week or next month, tackle the pantry, but just start with one thing at a time. And I can just share that as a father of 6 kids, like, I have been pleasantly surprised at how well kids will adapt to this. At first, they might throw up a little bit of fight because they like a certain kind of chip or a certain kind of cracker or a certain kind of cereal in the morning. But if you go slow, you don't have to throw out the whole pantry at once. But if you find things that are replacements, for me, I just started buying a ton of avocados. I'm so blessed because my kids, even my littlest 5 and 7-year-old, they love avocado. So I know that if I mix anything with avocado, they're going to eat it. Like, they'll sit down and eat half an avocado right out of the peel with a spoon and just sprinkle a little salt on it. That's how much they love avocado. And so you just find out the couple things that your kids really like, and then you just add to it, and they will get used to it. And pretty soon they'll tell you, Dad, gosh, I went to my friend's birthday party and I had a piece of that cake, and like afterwards I felt like total crap. And it's like, and you just want to like jump up and down and hip, hip, hooray. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they discovered that on their own. And I didn't have to tell them like, oh, you got to avoid this, you got to avoid that. Like, they'll literally will find it out on their own, because they'll eat so good at home that when they sample what's in their friend's lunch, which may be a Hot Pocket or something, and they come home with a stomach ache, they'll be able to tie 2 and 2 together, and they'll go, hey, that Hot Pocket I ate at school, it made me feel like total garbage. I never want to eat a Hot Pocket again. And you're like, yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So they notice this kind of thing.
That is awesome. And that's such a good point for people who do have kids, and especially if they're making sort of this transition. I, of course, don't have kiddos, so I can't speak to that. But I do often tell my clients, we have to really look out for ourselves when we're in our lowest place, right? Because oftentimes, when we are feeling good and we've gotten enough sleep and we're not fighting with our significant other or anything like that, and there's no work stress, like, sometimes we have the willpower to be like, all right, I'm going to pick the healthy food out of the pantry, or there's not very much healthy food right in the pantry, so out of the fridge. And I'm going to go towards those options. But usually, not all the time, but usually when we're making a lot of these decisions, they're very impulsive and they're emotional decisions that we make, whether we're addicted to something or we have an emotional trigger, we get in a fight with somebody, we're stressed out, we got poor sleep. And that's when we really start to gravitate towards the pantry, the snack foods, because we use food to numb. We get that dopamine response from it. So we also have to start looking out for ourselves when we're not in the best mindset with our version of ourselves, when we're in that highest mindset. Ultimately, I always give the analogy of like an alcoholic, and not saying everybody's a food addict, but a lot of people are a food addict because of what essentially is taking place in the brain with the addictions that really are being created. And if you were someone who's an alcoholic, you wouldn't have a house that was full of a bunch of alcohol. You wouldn't. And you could be an alcoholic and be like, I'm good, I haven't touched the drinks in my house forever. But then you have that one day where you got in a fight with your spouse, you had an awful day at work, and you come home, and guess what? There's all the alcohol, and you just want to grab it and drink it, and you're like, oh, I feel better. So we need to start thinking about looking out for ourselves in that type of an environment, as if we're like an alcoholic. It's out of sight, out of mind. And then we're gonna better prep ourselves for making better choices. I know for myself, I'm probably, in those moments, not gonna drive out to go get fast food. I know there's Uber Eats and things like that, but if you have the food readily available in your house, the good, real whole food, and you can do your best to try to get rid of a lot of these ultra processed foods, you're going to start making the right decision, and then you're going to start craving those foods a lot more. So I did want to add that point in about really looking out for ourselves when we're in that lowest state, because typically food is a very emotional decision that we're all making overall. I know one thing too, kind of switching gears here, I want to talk about is metabolism too, because you talked about some interesting things there, kind of rewinding a while back about metabolism and the people who were, I think they were in Africa, and they have the same metabolic rate as
Tanzania,
with the Western diet ultimately. And, essentially, I feel like so many people are like, what can I do to boost my metabolism? What foods can I eat? And it's such a big advertisement thing that we use. And I've even used a thing like quote unquote metabolism, like this are some things you can do to boost your metabolism. But what's so interesting and about a study that actually Sean Stevenson shared on my podcast a little over a year ago is really the difference of calories that are absorbed and utilized, comparing these ultra processed foods, comparing real whole food. And the study that I'm thinking of, and I can't quote the exact study because I don't have it in the top of my mind, but it was comparing a processed food sandwich where it was like the processed food cheese-like substance where it's really not cheese.
Velveeta.
The Velveeta, the Kraft kind of stuff. Processed bread compared with, and the real whole food was actually still bread and real cheese. But what was so interesting about the study between the processed food sandwich and the real whole food sandwich was there was a big difference in the amount of calories that were actually extracted and utilized from these foods. So that really makes me ask the question, is it the food and how much we're actually really absorbing from these different types of foods, ultra processed foods, real whole foods, things that are happening in our body with inflammation that's impairing it? Or is it really a metabolism issue?
Yeah, no, that's such a great concept. And that study it literally is hilarious, because even I'll have to, be honest, when they call it whole food, like the whole food sandwich, I mean, it was a better quality sandwich, but probably you or I wouldn't be eating that particular sandwich, but it was amazing how distinctly different and better it was than the one with the white bread. Remember those like Wonder Breads that we used to eat as kids, the whiter, the better. And, now what I tell people is just avoid anything that's bread, white or brown at the supermarket, like anything that's white or brown or very plain looking, that's not super colorful. As far as like real whole foods, I don't mean the dyes they put in, because of course we want to avoid dyes, but like anything that's white or brown and kind of boring looking, most of that stuff we shouldn't eat anyway. But that's an interesting study, because it just really brings up this whole concept about the metabolism. Everybody has this question, especially I think a lot of our audience, Rachel, that's getting, 10 years older. We get into our late 20s, early 30s, and we're like, oh crap, I feel like I'm just getting slower than normal. I don't have that energy. I can't quite eat like I used to. Like, what's going on? Did my metabolism slow down? We all blame our metabolism. Like, what the heck happened to our metabolism? Well, there was a really cool study, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, last year in the journal Science, which is one of the most well-recognized journals in the world, like very prestigious, high-quality literature there. And this article specifically looked at metabolism in folks between the ages of 18 and 60. So basically, adults in most age groups between 18 and 60. And what they found is that the metabolism between those years, when we are a full-fledged 18-year-old all the way till when we're 60, the metabolism absolutely does not appreciably slow down. They didn't even see any big hints towards slowing until after 60 years of age. So what slows down, Rachel? Well, you and I might slow down. And what we are doing, not just the movement, but the kinds of foods we are eating, all of that impacts our metabolism. So our metabolism is perfect. We have a perfectly wonderful, capable metabolism, but sometimes it gets a little bit, broken in the sense that it's not operating at the best high efficiency level that it could. And so what happens with that metabolism is that we no longer can, like you mentioned in this kind of crazy example of the processed food versus the quote unquote whole food, analysis, but we are not utilizing our foods as well as we could because our metabolism isn't working well. And the biggest factor in there, and you kind of alluded to this in our kind of pre-talk where we were talking about, oxidative stress, for example, how that can impact things. Well, that's literally one of the things that can mess up our metabolism, is the oxidative stress of eating foods that aren't real, whole, and natural. So anytime we eat something that's highly processed, guess what? That stuff burns. The analogy I give is kind of like the diesel, burning vehicle, which burns that heavy kind of sooty, you can see that big plume of smoke come off, to then if you have, let's say, an electric vehicle that has basically zero emission. Like that's the difference between a highly functioning metabolism and one that's burning, kind of crappy ingredient food that's leaving a trail of soot, because that trail of soot is inflammation, and that's oxidative stress. So when we burn those highly processed sugars, flours, seed oils, basically it leaves a heavy exhaust that then in turn damages our metabolism. That's the so-called oxidative stress that damages our metabolism to where it cannot effectively process what we are feeding it. And so we don't extract the energy that we need and want. And at the same time, it, has this kind of unfortunate synergy where it just gets worse and worse over time. So it gets more and more broken unless we do something about it. So that's the cool part, is we can affect this in a matter of days to weeks. We can literally turn our metabolism around and quote unquote fix it, because it may be broken. You as a person, Rachel, or your viewers, none of us, we are not broken. We are not broken. We may have a broken metabolism, but that's just because of all of these factors that we've chosen over the years, like what we're going to eat and what we're going to do or not do. And I appreciate what you mentioned just a little while back when you talked about when we're maybe not at our best selves because we were under stress from work, or maybe we didn't get a good sleep last night. And so we were operating from a place that was not our best self. Those factors play into this a lot. Like besides food, I would say that sleep and stress play into that sort of inflammatory cascade almost as much as anything else. And I didn't appreciate this a couple of decades ago when I was in my early years of being a physician, where I slept 4 to 6 hours a night. I just thought that was the norm, and my wife had to bring it up and say, dude, what happened to you? You're so cranky all the time. Like, why are you so edgy? Why are you so, grumpy? You come home and you sit on the couch and you just want to watch TV and eat a bowl of ice cream like every night. What's the matter with you? And the fact of the matter was I wasn't sleeping well. Like it was that simple. It was stress from work, and it was the lack of sleep. And those things are very inflammatory when we are not getting optimal sleep, when we are having lots of stress and we're not managing it well. Those play into this whole oxidative stress part of the metabolism that makes it not work so well. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because the cool part about that is we can easily fix that. It's not difficult. We just have to make it a priority, right? Set a little timer on your phone that says, okay, it's bedtime now. And then, have a cool environment, have a dark environment, have either some kind of earplugs, or, turn off the screens an hour before, stop eating 3 hours before, all these simple things, but they make a big difference in the end. I don't know if you've noticed that as well.
Yeah, I actually went through a bout of insomnia, not a couple of years ago, actually, literally a year ago. And it was actually one of the hardest things that I've ever walked through, because it affected every single area of my life. It affected my health. It affected my work. It affected my relationships. I was just literally in survival mode. So I totally understand, when you speak to like the little sleep, that so many of us are getting, and how that can really play a role in our health. And also people who've like been stuck with, they're trying to get sleep, but there's just things that are off internally in their body that's also inhibiting sleep, because that's also in the boat that I've been before. And it ended up being a combination of, emotional stress that I was walking through. I think a couple other things too. I was super lean, blood sugar played probably a bit there too, but, emotional stress feeding into the sleep, and then just it dominoing from there. But that's right. There's all of these other different areas that we have to also look at when we're taking a holistic approach to our health and really getting to the root cause. It's not only just the food that we eat and we put in our body, but it's also our toxic relationships, along with the toxic food, along with, our lack of sleep, along with essentially everything else that goes into that, to sunlight, not getting sunlight every single day, sitting down, being sedentary. Like all of these are going to play a massive role in your overall health. And it's not just about the absence of disease. That's one thing he's spoken to this entire podcast. It's about living and feeling your very best every single day. And it's not enough to just go to the doctor and run some basic labs and to say, all right, you're picture perfect of health, and you're struggling with all of these health issues. You're overweight, you have symptoms, whether it's gut issues, you're not sleeping, that is not enough. We really need to start addressing, essentially these lifestyle factors. And I think that's what's so powerful about the work that you're doing, and why you got onto the preventative side, and why I'm so passionate about this work ultimately too, is, helping people stepping into their most empowered self. But we can't do that. We can't do that if this essentially isn't right in the first place overall. So starting with getting the mind right, get the body right. You guys know I'm all about gut health too, and I would have loved to dive into a bit more on the gut health side, because I know that plays a huge role. But I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add on the gut health side, because that's something that I really start with as a foundation, right, when addressing overall health, and especially key drivers of inflammation as well.
Yeah, no, gut health is what's really cool about gut health is that when you look at these other areas that we just mentioned, optimizing your sleep, for example, optimizing your stress and how you respond to stress, because you can literally, like, we all get stressed, right? Last couple of years, we've had tons of stress. And one of my favorite studies looking at that came out in I think year 2012, it looked at almost 200,000 people. And what they found is that it wasn't just the level of stress that you had, like they had them rate, low, medium, high stress, but it was actually more than that. It was the meaning that you attached to that stress. So in other words, they had people in that high stress group, the highest tier, that had adverse health, outcomes. They got more sick more often. They had more diseases. They died younger, all of those things. But that was only a subset. There was actually a group in that high stress group that was the most stress you could imagine, super high stress jobs, all this kind of stuff. But they believed in their minds and hearts that the stress was not bad for them, that it was actually more of a challenge. It was empowering. They could grow from it. And those people not only did not have the negative effects, but it was protective. In other words, they lived longer, they had less health issues, yet they were in that highest tier of stress. And so there's so much about just the space that we're in mentally, the meaning that we attach to something. We get to decide, here in our mind and in our heart, if that is something that's going to be negative or something that's positive. Like, we ultimately have control over that. And then, of course, there's all those amazing techniques that you and I love to talk about, like breath work or, just movement. For me, like getting out of a bad state, for me, the easiest way is I just go out and move my body for, 1 to 2 minutes. I do 20 or 30 pull-ups, or I go for a couple laps around the house, or I get a couple of waves, or I hike up the hill, or just something really quick to change my state. Like, that's one of my favorite stress relief, options. And breath work, those are my two favorites. But there's so many things that we can do. And so when you ask about gut health, the cool thing is when you optimize your sleep, when you optimize how you deal or manage or just work with the stress in your life, and you optimize your diet and then the movement, when you do those things and then start to really focus on sort of those other couple of things, and there's not that many other things, it's about, for example, when we think about the gut, those guys, it's hard to believe, but they literally live on a circadian clock like we do, a light and dark cycle. And when we start to pay attention to that day-night cycle ourselves, we get up when the sun rises, we start, tapering down when the sun goes down, we don't eat after dark, all these kinds of things. That actually helps our gut too. So the cool thing about the gut, Rachel, is it responds to every one of these areas that are so important. And yes, it matters, what we are eating 100%, because what we eat, they also see as well. And so when we start to feed them the things that are good for those beneficial bacteria down there, all the bifidobacteria and lactobacilli, that are really great for us, when we start feeding them the high fibrous, real foods, they start to, go, oh, that's great. Like, eat more of it. Your whole cravings change. Everything changes, where you don't even want those highly processed, ultra processed, hyper palatable foods, because they don't even look good anymore. They don't even look like food, right? You go by the Starbucks and you're like, those guys are eating scones. Like, those things look like dirt. They look terrible. They don't even look good to you anymore, because you're recognizing the things that help you to feel good. Those fresh vegetables and fruits. And so what I love about gut health is it's really a reflection of all of these aspects of our health, from the sleep to the movement to the stress optimization. All of these things reflect upon the health of our gut. So when we do those things, we are naturally also benefiting the gut. And it's such a synergistic effect. Like, it's not 2 + 2 = 4, Rachel. When we start doing these things, it's literally 2 + 2 = 12. Like, it's such an amazing effect. And I would say to the viewers and listeners, like, don't feel intimidated by this. It's literally just the simple things every day. Get up in the morning and try to see some daylight. Have that natural light hit your eyes for like 2 minutes. Take a quick walk around your block or just around your house, or just put your bare feet outside for a couple of minutes, as long as it's not sub-zero temperatures where you are. But, take like literally 60 seconds in the morning to get that sun to hit your eyes. Get outside, ground yourself. Have a little bit of, moment where you just think about a couple of things you're grateful for. Like, literally, this routine can be a couple of minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour in the morning, but it starts the whole day in a totally different, positive mindset. And you're getting the natural cues as well that affect your biology, your circadian biology, also the gut's circadian biology. And these things are more than additive. They are literally synergistic and can be exponential, but they are simple. They're not hard, and we can do them. So that's why I wrote the book. So thanks for asking me. We'll have to get into gut health more, because I love to nerd out on that with you, as you know, but we can do that another time.
I know I could go for another hour and keep nerding out with you. And I just appreciate you and how much you've simplified a lot of these things for the listeners, because, it can feel so overwhelming, and you take what can feel like complicated subjects and really break them down to, hey, just start with this, cut out these 3 ingredients, focus on eating real whole foods, start with your refrigerator first. Hey, when you wake up in the morning, start with some gratitude, maybe get some movement in, just get a little bit of sunlight, just very simple things that people can start with. And I think that's really what it takes, is it's one small step, and it really dominoes essentially from there, because we start to see the benefits of what it's really doing for our life. And you guys will see benefits from even these itty bitty little micro changes. I know we sometimes think like, oh my gosh, I need to change everything, and hey, if that's what you do, awesome. Some people that works for, but I'd say most of the time, just making these small micro changes, seeing the results that you really get from that, and then really going from there is going to also make an incredible change ultimately in your life, how you feel, your relationships. It just starts to domino from there. So Dr. Thomas Hemingway, it's been an honor to have you on the show here today. Where can people learn more about your book you got coming out, follow you on social media, check out your website, all of the links?
Yeah, awesome. Well, the easiest place to find me is either on my website, which is just my name, Thomas, Thomas, and then Hemingway, which is Hemingway. I spell it just like Ernest, 1 M, or just on Instagram, Dr. Thomas Hemingway, which is just Dr. Thomas Hemingway. The book is called Preventable: 5 Powerful Practices to Avoid Disease and Build Unshakable Health. And it will be out very, very soon, if not already by the release of this podcast. And the great thing about this is what Rachel just said, is it's simple daily practices that we can all do that are affordable. In fact, they're, I think, almost entirely all free. They don't cost money. You don't have to have a gym membership. You don't have to have anything fancy. They can be done simply, and they are powerful. And with that, you will live better on the day-to-day and live longer, but younger. And that's my goal. And I'll be here to share it with you. 100 years in surfing. And I just hope this has helped you. And I would love to have you reach out. If you feel like you want to ask me questions, reach out to me on Instagram or on my website, or grab the book. It's thepreventablebook.com. I would love to help you just continue this journey, because it's a journey, and just take it one day at a time, one step at a time. And it can be really, really simple yet powerful.
All right, guys, we will put all of those links there in the show notes. So you can just click the bio, head over to check out everything that Dr. Thomas Hemingway has got going on. And if you guys got a lot out of today's episode, do us a favor, take a little screenshot of you listening to today, share it in your stories, whether that's Instagram or Facebook. This is a completely free podcast that I do. And I'm really doing it to really spread more information, get people more on board for their health, for healing. Not everybody can afford to do coaching. Not everybody can afford to do functional medicine, but this is a free podcast. So if you got something out of today's episode, pay it forward, share it in your stories, share it with a friend. We greatly, greatly appreciate you supporting our mission. And this has been Scheer Madness.